I would never forget it. I felt literally less than a woman. Oh my God, I can't even explain. Emotionally, I was like, I cried and I cried. I was like, they took part of my womanhood. I was really messed up for a while.
In the summer of 2013, the Center for Investigative Reporting broke the disturbing story about the sterilization of women in California prisons, a story that prompted hearings in the state capitol.
When a recent Center for Investigative Reports story broke, claiming that women in the California prison system were undergoing sterilizations, many of us were shocked and outraged.
I think this is something that unites all of us to protect the civil rights of people who are not free.
In the gallery was the reporter who broke the story, Corey Johnson. He found that between 2006 and 2010, 148 women were sterilized in California's prisons.
The state has admitted that they have done these illegal surgeries, but we don't actually know who they did them on.
What we found thus far in the reporting is that there were rules in place, and that the officials involved in recommending these procedures to the women knew that the rules were in place and consciously decided to break the rules.
How was this allowed to happen? To understand how, it's important to look at California's long history of state-sponsored sterilizations and even eugenics. If you look back, there was this doctor by the name of Leo Stanley who went into prisons and literally removed the testicles of male inmates and replaced them with testicles of men who had died but were deemed socially fit. And he had sterilized as many as 600 men in the state of California. And if you look at California as a whole, you'll notice that it was actually the worst state when it came to the eugenics program. They basically sterilized as many as 20,000 people and accounted for about 1/3 of sterilizations in the entire country. The Nazis modeled their eugenics program on theories developed in California.
That was my initial impetus, to look at sterilizations that occurred, in the early 1900s.
Scientists at Stanford promoted sterilization as a way to improve society and even traded papers in the 1930s with their Third Reich counterparts.
And so as I'm digging to try to learn more about historical eugenics, I get this tip that perhaps there was more current day sterilizations that had taken place, and that these sterilizations may have occurred in the prison.
In the 1970s, sterilizations were prohibited at all state institutions unless they were medically necessary. Finally, in 1995, even clearer regulations were put in place to close this chapter in California's history. But Corey began investigating suspect sterilizations that occurred as recently as 2010.
So I reached out and I cast my net really wide, and I took trips all across the state. But for a lot of people, talking about whether they were sterilized is a very tough thing to do. It's a lot of shame that's around it. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of hurt. There's a lot of pain.
Corey interviewed several women for his report. These are extracts from what they told him, read out by actors.
He said, "So we're going to be doing this tubal ligation, right?" I'm like, "Tubal ligation? What are you talking about? I don't want any procedure. I just want to have my baby." I went into a straight panic.
I figured that's just what happens in prison, that that's the best kind of doctor you're going to get. He never told me nothing about nothing.
One of his nurses asked me, "How many kids do you have?" She said, 7. Like she was just so appalled. I felt humiliated and insulted, I made a mistake, and I'm here. But I love my kids being treated like I was less than human. It produced in me a despair.
This is a drawer for the destruction of reproductive capacity.
Justice Now, a legal aid organization in Oakland, began documenting cases of prison sterilization several years ago.
And we started to receive reports from people about having gone in for different kinds of reproductive care or surgeries and coming out without their ovaries, coming out without their uterus.
The allegations they gathered from former inmates are shocking but difficult to verify. This is what the women told Justice Now, again read by actors.
He had a camera inside of me. He says he has to do this to give me a hysterectomy. I said, I don't want a hysterectomy. He said, how old are you? I said, I'm 44. He said, well, you're too old to have any more children, so it doesn't really matter.
I finally got sent to Madera Hospital to get a tonsillectomy. And I met 5 women from Valley State Women's Prison getting hysterectomies within a 24-hour period. There's a joke going around that Madera is selling women's uteruses.
I went to the library and I picked up a few things on hysterectomies. And when I read the pamphlet, it had nothing to do with why I had my hysterectomy. When I went back to my paperwork, it said, prolapsed uterus. He never told me anything about that. So I wonder if that's what he had to write to get the hysterectomy approved.
So when I heard stories like these, naturally, I tried to check them out.
Corey analyzed records of the most common methods of sterilization carried out in California's prisons over the last 14 years. He found a system riddled with questionable procedures and noticed that in 2006, the sterilization spiked. That was when Dr. James Heinrich became the chief OBGYN at Valley State Prison.
My name is Crystal Nguyen. I spent 5.5 years at Valley State Prison for Women.
Crystal was serving time for her part in an armed robbery committed by her boyfriend. At 19, Crystal found herself pregnant and behind bars.
Dr. Heinrich was the main GYN doctor there at the time when I first got there. When I first saw him, he looked like, he looks like a nice guy. But when I would ask him questions about my pregnancy, he would laugh at it and make me feel stupid. So then I didn't feel comfortable with him after that. And it was weird because he would examine, when he would be eating popcorn all the time. Popcorn, cheese, and crackers. And he would be examining while he would be eating. And to me, it's not hygienic. It was gross. So it just creeped me out.
Crystal was under Dr. Heinrich's care during her pregnancy. Her baby was taken away less than 3 days after she gave birth.
When they came and they got him, I felt like I was really alone now.
She was then assigned a job in the prison's infirmary, which meant working under Dr. Heinrich, where she witnessed firsthand how he persuaded women to be sterilized.
Well, sometimes there's someone out there that maybe needed a pee cup or needed something, because I'd have to wait behind the screen until, a nurse came over or came out or poked out, or I would say, excuse me, when they were finished talking, like, I need something, and they would, come. So I would hear, I heard Dr. Heinrich talking about, well, maybe, you should do something so you can't have any more kids, because if that's how your life is and you don't have any support, that's how I know for a fact that people weren't just saying it, it's true.
Crystal wasn't surprised that women felt they had been coerced by their doctor.
Inside of prison, once you're in there, it's as if you're treated as an animal, as that you have no rights. No one's gonna care because basically you've been to prison, so they feel like that you're less than, and that you don't deserve to have kids. You committed a crime. You're in prison. You're doing your time, and they're thinking that we're doing society a favor by not letting you reproduce.
We were told Dr. Heinrich was too ill to speak to us for this film. In an earlier interview, he denied pressuring anyone and said the money spent to perform these operations in prison was small compared to what you save in welfare paying for these unwanted children as they procreate more. In 2006, the same year Heinrich was hired, federal courts found that medical care in California prisons violated the constitutional ban on cruel and unusual punishment. The court set up what they call a federal receiver's office. Its job is to oversee the medical care for all the inmates in California. They're responsible for enforcing the ban on sterilizations. However, according to a 2008 document from the receiver's office itself, They knew sterilizations were continuing. Justice Now says this raises serious concerns about whether the receiver's office was doing its job.
We received the documentation of tubal ligations being performed between 2006 and 2010 directly from the Federal Receiver's Office, and 50 of those happened between 2008 and 2010.
The California Department of Corrections told us that any questions about sterilizations must be directed to the receiver's office. I feel like everyone keeps passing the buck. No one wants to answer any questions. So we're going to talk to this woman named Joyce Hayhoe. She's the spokesperson for the receiver's office. I want to know why the receiver's office didn't investigate this until 2010 when there was evidence indicating that they knew what was going on as early as 2008.
First of all, I just want to mention that, number one, under the regulations, a tubal ligation shouldn't be performed. But what we can see from going back and looking at the cases that were being performed is that inmates were asked as part of a service being provided to them whether or not they wanted to have a tubal ligation. And if so, it appears that the inmates were being provided with an informed consent form and talked to with regard to the procedure that was being offered to them.
So have you spoken to the doctors about any of this? Are they being investigated, and will there be any consequences for their role in these tubal ligations?
With all of the information that we've provided to our doctors and all of the patient education with our patient education with our doctors, a doctor now performing a tubal ligation in our system would be very egregious and absolutely would be something that would be a dismissible offense. We have no information at this time that any procedure was ever forced on a female. Were these procedures inappropriate? Absolutely. But were they forced? Every indication we have is that this has not happened.
But where's the line? I mean, there were two. When I gave Joyce specific examples of women who did feel coerced, she wouldn't talk about them, claiming patient privacy.
So we are having the audit to specifically look into these cases. So I can't specifically talk about each individual case due to HIPAA regulations, but we know that the audit will delve into each procedure to determine what happened and why.
The audit is still ongoing, and the findings will be due out early next year, according to the State House. At Justice Now, there's concern that the entire issue may be brushed under the rug. We spoke to Joyce Hayhoe from the receiver's office. She basically said that they are now putting certain regulations in place to prevent this type of intimidation behind bars.
Yeah, that's interesting that she says that. And again, it's really hard. I mean, I'm not saying Joyce Hayhoe is a liar. She doesn't know what she's talking about. But you have to remember, she was not working there during those years. People are still being coerced because we're throwaways. We're cast out of society. We were locked away from society. So we're basically society's trash in a lot of their eyes. So it's easy for them to just treat us as such.
Misty Rojo knows this firsthand. She served nearly 9 years for attempted murder at Valley State Women's Prison. She says at the heart of the sterilization issue is informed consent. When prison doctors ask you to sign a form, it's not as cut and dry as it may seem to those who have never been locked up.
So for them to say, we feel like you should do this, you feel more or less compelled to comply because that's what you're taught in there. You comply with the rules so you can get out. So if you can imagine that type of structure to be asked to sign off your right to have children, it's still not informed. It's not very consensual. It doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel comfortable.
The hearings last August in California were a first step in state efforts to uncover what really happened with these sterilizations behind bars.
They had representatives from the federal court, the receiver's office, show up. It was a packed room. There was a lot of emotion in the room.
When you're in prison, you do what you're told to do to get out, period. So even in the idea of medical care, if a doctor tells you you should do this, you're automatically inclined to feel like you should do it, simply because of the environment you're in. And you're likely to sign a paper without fully understanding the lifelong ramifications, especially if they hand you a paper, you sign it, that's it. Some people may be happy with that decision, But at the end of the day, it is non-informed consent, and it is coercive. Thank you.
But in terms of detailed answers into why this practice had been going on in violation of the rules, possibly going all the way back from the early 90s, we didn't get any closer to getting any answers in that hearing at all.
I guess what I'm trying to say is we had a regulation in place, and for some reason that regulation was not followed. And so we had some conflicting information going out to the people within the department, and we think that that's an important part of the story.
Shortly after the hearings, we obtained this letter showing that the California Medical Board is investigating the now retired Dr. Heinrich.
It's scary to know that your life is in someone's hands like that. And they could just do whatever they want without your consent. They could do it and get away with it without any repercussions or anything going on. And that it took this long for it to be exposed.
The ultimate dream would be for them to pass a bill to further clarify laws so that they know no one can do this ever. I would love for the doctors to have to take responsibility for the surgeries that they did do. And I would like for the people whom this happened to know that this was not supposed to happen to them.
Wonderful piece dealing with what's really going on with the women behind bars, and what a shame that is that they are able to do, meaning those officials that are in the prison system, along with the doctors, are able to just take these women and really just strip them of their humanity. With even without their consent, because you gotta understand that when you in prison, you belong to the state. You're the state's property, and what a shame that is that this has been going on so long, and no one, to my knowledge, hasn't been any any arrest of any kind. There have been ongoing investigations, but I just want you to understand the severity when you talk about a new world order and population control. Man, these people are serious. This government is so serious. And I'm gonna give you some facts right now dealing with the prison system, and particularly women in general. Here in the United States, you have 2.3 million people behind bars, and the U.S. has the world's highest incarceration rate. And not only that, we have even more people in prison in the U.S. than China, and China has 4 times the amount of population. Now, how in the world can China have 4 times the amount of population, but here we are having twice as many people in the prison system? So amazing. The number of women in prison increased by 646% between 1980 and 2010, rising from 15,118 women incarcerated to a whopping 112,797 women incarcerated. And if we include local jails, that's more than 205,000 women are now incarcerated. And the female prison population is increasingly at nearly double the rate than men. This is a recent study that was done in 2012, that women are going to prison faster than men. So amazing. So amazing. 2/3 of women in prison are there for non-violent offenses. Many are for drug-related cases. And what that means, people, trespassing, shoplifting, DUI. Somebody in there for child support. But non-violent traffic violations, you name it. Check forgery. Non-violent offenses, 2/3 of the prison population. Now, truth be told, that's for men too. But 2/3 of the people that are in prison are non-violent offenders. In Oklahoma, this is the greatest incarceration state there is for women. Oklahoma incarcerates more women per capita than any other state, with 130 out of every 100,000 women in prison. And Massachusetts has the lowest rate of female imprisonment at 13 per 100 women. 1 in 25 in state prison and 1 in 33 in federal prison are pregnant when admitted to prison. Women can be shackled during labor in at least 32 states. Can you imagine you being a woman, you in labor, and they got you shackled to a bed, your feet and your arm? The majority of women, the majority of the children born to incarcerated mothers are immediately separated from that mother. And women in prison are more likely than are men to be victims of staff sexual misconduct. We didn't even go there. I mean, women got double for when it comes to being incarcerated. Women has it double for their trouble. More than 3/4 of all reported staff sexual misconduct involves women who were victimized by male correctional staff. And black women, they represent 30% of all incarcerated women in the U.S., although they represent 13% of the female population generally, but 30% incarcerated. That's a whole lot of women in prison. Latinas represent 16% of incarcerated women, although they make up only 11% of all women in the U.S. I'm going to do a show, and I have to, people, because we talk about unity all the time, about love and oneness of all men, all people, and we will continue to talk in oneness and unity. But when you look at life as a whole, no matter where you turn, high, low, up, no matter where you look, there is always something that is so criminal, that's so demonic when dealing with people of color. Black folks in general, what I'm trying to say. We always get it the hardest. And I'm not talking black and white. I'm not talking about white folk. I'm talking about Dominican Republic, Cuba, Haiti, Brazil, Israel, everywhere we reside, Mexico. We have the worst of hardship because of the color of our skin. That has to be something about that. Because if the only reason you demonize a person is the color of their skin, then there's got to be some power behind it. For you to have that much fear and that much hate in your spirit, that every nationality, not just white folk, everywhere you turn, and this isn't a woe is me, these are facts. Facts. Black folks are being shoved out of something. Makes you really wonder if we are really God's people, or at least God's chosen people. Because don't no other race go through what black folk go through, and all over the regions, over the continent of this earth, don't nobody go through what we go through. We can't go nowhere and just be us of color. It's amazing. You got light-skinned Dominican, light-skinned Mexican, you got light-skinned Cuban, I mean, everywhere. I just had to put that out there because it's just so amazing that every time I'm looking at numbers and statistics. We are, it's such a wide disparity, it's ridiculous. It's amazing. When you look at transgender inmates, they always house according to their birth gender. The two most common responses are housing transgender prisoners on the basis of their birth gender or placing them in isolation. So amazing that all of these beautiful women that and a lot of our women are getting caught up just dealing with the wrong guy. You know, women always brag about that. I want a thug. I want a bad boy. And then they end up getting just that. And this idiot end up getting you to do something stupid for him. And in return, you get locked up for years and sometimes for decades. And here you are. He got maybe 18 months in prison. And the judge will give you 10 years or so. And here you are, away from your children. All because you allowed someone to come into your world, latch onto your spirit, and take your power from you. That's what men do, women. They take your, you know, a wonderful friend of mine was talking about how her father told her growing up to never allow a man to take your power. Well, in another world, that would be a wonderful statement that all men can tell their daughters growing up, not to allow a man to take your power. And it's not just sexual. It's not just the sex part, ladies. It's the emotional, the mental, spiritual. Because what you're doing, you're allowing that energy of a negative man to flow inside of you. And now, and here you are. Now you got a lazy, no good man. And guess what? That's what you become. You become what you associate with. Wonderful story. And I'm going to stop right here because I don't want to take away from this story. I don't want to get too deep. But I really wanted to bring this message to you tonight, dealing with our wonderful, beautiful black Nubian sisters and our Latino sisters as well, that are really being railroaded in these prisons, people. I mean, they're being jammed up and just thrown into prison to really just strip them from no longer having babies. It's crazy. It's demonic, but it's crazy. So to all the wonderful women out there, what I say to you is we love you. Stay positive. Keep your head up to the sky. Know who you are. Love you and love yourself. Love your God. And continue to walk in the God in you. Thank you all for tuning in tonight, and I hope you all were inspired by this show. And again, guys, follow us on the Holy Spirit's Blog Talk Radio Show. You can go to www.blogtalkradio.com/Holy Spirits and follow us, if you will, to get all the latest shows and upcoming events. You can also go to our webpage at www.holyspiritsradio.org and see all the latest news that we've been doing and what we're going to be doing in the near future, and as well as the Nehemiah Project as well. And finally, you can check us out also on Facebook at Holy Spirits ITV /radio show. And also you can go to our other Facebook page at Inspiring Truth, and give us a feedback on any topics or shows that you might want to talk about. And if you want to be a guest on the show, again, go to our Holy Spirit's radio.org webpage and go to the contact page and let us know if you are an author or a singer, an artist, or if you know of anyone. Please feel free to email us. Drop us an email, man, and we would love to bring them on the show, because we love to empower people and show off the gifts of God through the universe. So again, we thank you for tuning in. And as we say in parting, to love yourselves is to know yourselves, and to know yourselves comes by spending time with God. We love you. We will talk to you tomorrow. Peace and God bless.
Blog Talk Radio.